Good afternoon, everyone. I am Jamarl Thomas. I am your host. This is the Progressive Soapbox. I hope you guys have had a good day up to this point. I've been awash in news this morning. Everything from Iran to Venezuela, Julian Assange. It's funny. It's like politics offshore. But it is offshore, but it's us doing things offshore. So in an odd way, it does involve us, unfortunately. That said, I kind of want to start with a story that I did yesterday. One, Mr. Cenk Uygur of the quote-unquote home of the progressives, saying something that is not necessarily a progressive disposition at all. Cenk Uygur made a video, somewhat of a chest-thumping video. He felt that this was so important that he had to take his own time. He had to do it off the show. He's like, oh, this is so important. I need to not wait for the show. I need to do the news. I need to do the news in my basement. And so he grabs his camera and he goes to do the news. What does he say? He says the most amazing thing. I told you so. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's even a title. Told ya. Told us about what, Cenk? That Trump was dirty, that he was colluding with the Russians. What is evidence of this that you're using? What evidence do you have where you can chest up like this? You can raise the paper. That you can raise the paper saying, what's his name wins. Donald Trump had a call with Vladimir Putin. Okay. And in that phone call, Putin talked to Trump. Okay. And Putin tells Trump that Venezuela is a bad idea. All right, it is a bad idea. Oh, right. But Trump changes his mind on Venezuela. What? He changes policy? Yes, he changes his policy on Venezuela. And he makes Bolton look bad. Now, there are a few things wrong with this assessment. In fact, one, if everything that he said in this video was true, it still wouldn't mean anything. Just saying. It's not evidence of anything. So this chest thumping, as if you found the Holy Grail, even if everything you say in this video is true, it wouldn't mean a hill of beans getting you to this notion that it is evidence. It's not evidence of anything. The second point, if Trump changed his policy on Venezuela, this would be more in line with this notion that his policy was being constrained based on people like you and Rachel Maddow. Meaning the screaming that Russia and Trump were working together, that Donald Trump was being controlled by Vladimir Putin, by the Russian government, which has been Janks' assessment and which has been Rachel Maddow's assessment. My argument has been that that's been constraining Trump, meaning a president that went in office saying he wants to be less interventionist, that he wants to get embroiled in less foreign conflicts, to some degree gives this foreign policy over to a bunch of neocons who will absolutely get involved in those conflicts, if only to push back against the narratives that you guys put forth. Meaning, if Donald Trump wanted to get into that office and do something that was less hostile, less conciliatory, a less interventionist foreign policy, the very act of him doing that would get people like you and Maddow screaming, I told you he was dirty. What evidence do I have of that? Mueller comes out and says there's no collusion. Trump has a phone call with Vladimir Putin. That in and of itself seems, to condemn him for that. But beyond that point, him pulling out of Venezuela, despite the fact that Mueller comes out, looks into all of these areas, says there's no collusion, still has people like you are coming out saying, I told you, despite what Mueller said, despite the 2 years of investigation, despite the looking into all of this, dealing with the Russia and Trump stuff that these people were bringing up, despite squeezing this guy, trying to get this guy to talk, despite all of that, despite the evidence, despite the investigation, despite the conclusion of the investigation, I, Cenk Uygur, knew it. And how do I know it? Because he had a call with Vladimir Putin, and he, apparently to Uygur, changed his policy on Venezuela. Again, that would be more indicative of, look, the coup failed. And a president that didn't necessarily want to be interventionist is like, look, these guys are going to embroil me into a foreign conflict. One that he didn't necessarily want to get into, one that he said he didn't want to get into. And again, my argument has been that he gave his foreign policy over, if only to push back against this notion that he was soft on foreign policy towards Russia. When he said he wanted to pull out Afghanistan, when he said he wanted to pull out Syria. And now, any kind of modification to Venezuela is him colluding with the Russians. Or evidence of it. All right. And the last point, it's not true. It's not true. It's like, what are you saying? is not true. But first, let me let you hear Uygur himself. And I want to show you what lefty media has said about this. Because it wasn't just me yesterday. The reason I want to follow up this video, because I want to show you what all of these people that were involved in lefty media had to say and responded to Janks' statement. Let's take a listen to this. I just want to hear him first. The chest thumping. He's happy. He's pleased with himself.
Is changing. Told you. So Trump apparently is changing his Venezuela policy completely. So he had a lengthy call with Vladimir Putin the other day. After the phone call, he came out and said this. I'll read the direct quote for you guys.
Now, ultimately, Trump had this phone call. Trump comes back, and he's annoyed at John Bolton. He's annoyed at John Bolton because Bolton and the CIA gave him this impression that he was going to be able to get Maduro out without getting further involved into a major conflict, which is the key point that I want to get at. This is consistent with what he's been saying. Trump never said he wasn't a brinksman, nor did I ever think he was, I guess my only point is this. His giving frustration to Bolton, because Bolton maybe gave him an impression that Maduro will be out of office, and CIA maybe gave him an impression that Maduro would be out of office. He's frustrated. He's pissed off. But the key point here is the policy hasn't changed. Cenk Uygur is arguing that the policy hasn't completely changed. The article's right here. It's not, it's not invisible. Anybody can read the article. Right here. Trump has said in recent days that Bolton wants to get him into a war. Again, that's true. And for a president that came into office saying he didn't want to do that, that would be somewhat of a problem. So yeah, I would imagine that he would express frustration by that. A comment that he's made in jest in the past, but now betrays his most serious concerns. One senior administration official said, "It is possible that Donald Trump didn't want to be an interventionist president." Which means that it's possible that the reason, like I was saying, that Bolton and Pompeo to some degree was put into that office was to push back against people who were screaming at the height of his lungs that he was some kind of Russian bot. My point is, presidents, politicians push back against narratives. To some degree, part of the reason that Democrats are so hawkish is because Republicans have for the last 20 years called them soft. Why wouldn't Trump do the same thing with regards to something like Russia? I mean, all of these hawkish, hard neocon policies, he's essentially given his policies over to neocons and not necessarily invested in the particulars about the policy. But at the point where Mueller comes back and says there's no collusion, he has more agency in the office to make deals and to actually, let's say, more control over the edifice, especially if it's one of those things where he believes it's going to get him embroiled into a larger conflict. Here's the other part, though. The administration policy is officially unchanged in the wake of fizzle power play last week by U.S.-based opposition leader Juan Guaido. It fell apart. The coup fell apart. U.S. officials have pointed to the president's sustained commitment to the Venezuelan issue from the first weeks of his presidency as evidence that he has a realistic view of the challenges there and does not think it will be a quick fix. None of this says that his policy has changed. He complained, yeah. Trump is Maduro tough cookie, yes. Let's see. But Trump has expressed concern and Bolton has boxed him into a corner, has gone beyond where he is comfortable, said U.S. familiar with the Venezuelan issue. Again, all of this is indicative of a president that said on the campaign trail that he didn't necessarily want to get involved in these foreign conflicts, but to some degree gave his policy over the maniacs. He gave his policy over the maniacs. And now he's trying to rein in those maniacs. But I guarantee you this, those maniacs would not have been reined in if it wasn't for the Mueller thing. Meaning if it wasn't for Mueller coming back saying no collusion. He would have just left it over to the neocons. Right here. America stands with the great people of Venezuela for however long it takes, Trump tweeted on Wednesday. I don't see this as a change in policy. More like a more realistic undertaking of how long it's going to take to make this coup work. That's what it sounds like. Let's go to the lefties. I want to see what the lefties say about this. Because I wasn't alone, apparently, in taking issue. Now, Jank comes on Twitter. Trump just changed policy on Venezuela and is reportedly frustrated with Bolton and he's being too militaristic. That's news to Trump. That's just it. It might not have been news to Trump. But it's very possible that Trump put Bolton in that office and to push back people like you and Richard Maddow, screaming at the height of his lungs that he was soft on Russia. Just saying. While I agree with the new policy, but that's good, it comes right after a call with Putin. Problem, there is no new policy. There is no new policy. The old policy just fell apart in that sense. But the overall basics of the policy is still there. Bolton is still in that office. Pompeo is still in that office. They're still calling for a coup. They're still backing Guaido. What's changed? What's changed? Direct evidence that he's literally taking orders from Putin. Think about what that means. You have a president where the intelligence services, from the time he got into office, have been trying to get him out of that office. They've been leaking information. By the way, this is coming from somebody who doesn't like Trump in the least. But God, man, come on. Like, of all the major issues that there are to deal with, this is the shit that you're continuously dealing with. The intelligence services was trying to get Trump out of that office from day one. Not just day one, evidence was being leaked into the media itself. And you don't buy me on this. Richard Maddow was having a conversation early on when the Trump dossier first came out. Richard Engel, if I'm not mistaken, mainstream journalist, made the point that it looks like the intelligence services is leaking information on the president. Or on the person in the campaign. They were. My point is this. He has reason to be somewhat distrustful of an intelligence apparatus that has been to some degree against him. Yeah, he's going to be somewhat dicey about it. He has a conversation with Vladimir Putin. That conversation is not necessarily evidence that he's taking orders from Russia. And by the way, that conversation with Putin, he comes back with a different assessment. Good. Because Vladimir Putin gave him good advice. Don't get embroiled into a conflict in that country, and John Bolton is a fucking maniac. That was good advice. I'm glad he took it. I don't care where he got the advice from. That's not evidence of anything, considering that the advice was good. Not to mention, Uyghur's just wrong. You can read the article for yourself. I'll put it at the bottom. Abby Martin, what exactly is Trump's policy change on Venezuela? Good question indeed. Seems like he just made a comment about being annoyed with his coup failing. Meanwhile, he's unleashed goons to seize the DC embassy and is killing tens of thousands with sanctions. Please cover that. God, she has to ask him to cover that. Please cover that. That's brutal. The robust opposition, Laura Steiner. Laura Steiner's a pitbull. I love her to death. I've been personally asking Ryan Grimm from TYT Politics to cover this for 2 weeks. I wonder if Cenk Uygur is stopping him. Oh. Caitlin Johnston, she has very little patience with us. Oh my God, just stop. Just stop. MSNBC is never going to give you Maddow's job. Well, he already had Maddow's job at one point. He came online to do Maddow's job. He wants to get into another audience. Here's another one. Caitlin Johnston. Cenk Uygur keeps trying to out Maddow. Cenk keeps fighting to keep his idiotic Russia conspiracy theory alive and is doing so he exposing himself for the toxic, ambitious, she's going in, manipulator that he is. Oh, she has an article here. Let's go back. Let's tell the truth, shame the devil. All right, let's keep going. There's more. Ben Norton, another friend of the show. Extremely MSNBC Russiagate expert pundit voice, Cenk Uygur agrees with the new Putin-demanded Trump policy that he ordered the Russia puppet, meaning we have direct evidence that Cenk is literally taking order from Putin too. Putin controls all. Cenk, why do you agree with this if Putin is for this? Is Cenk Uygur for a policy that Vladimir Putin agrees with? Oh, scandal. Direct evidence indeed. He has direct evidence that Trump has completely changed his policies, both of which are utterly absurd, and yet he felt the need to do a separate video on this. Nico House, I'm so sleep off this. Laugh my ass off. It's that absurd, he couldn't even come up with a response for it, other than, I'm so sleep off this. Laughing my ass off. And then even Michael Jordan gets involved. Please stop it. And honestly, the biggest voice though, Robert Mueller. Mueller finds no Trump conspiracy. Mueller finds no conspiracy, Washington Post and the New York Times. Is it possible that Trump came to a different conclusion for other reasons, other than the narrow viewpoint that you have, believing in conspiracy theory? And yeah, conspiracy theory in the explicit meaning of the word, since Mueller found no conspiracy at all. The person who did the investigation. You're running with something that has been found to be false. And you're still digging the ditch. You're still digging that ditch. Let's see. There were people here. And I'll end this after this. Baltazar, you think that after John Jr. and Eric, who explicitly look like Beavis and Butthead, Trump would have learned that pulling out is usually a good... God, I didn't know where you were going with that. Shane Wolf. Oh, Shane Wolf. Thanks, man. Leave a comment, Shane. I like when people leave comments. You think that Don Jr. and Eric would explicitly look like Beavis and Butthead, Trump would have learned that pulling out is a good idea. That's hilarious. That's hilarious. All right. I'm going to end this. I'm going to end this because I have additional videos. But videos on... Jesus Christ, that's fucking hilarious. That's hilarious. All right, so I have videos on Venezuela, Iran, Julian Assange. There are a few, so stay with me. I'll be back in roughly 10 minutes or so, just however long it takes to wire up the next vid. This video by Janks was a fail, man. That was a fail. The policy hasn't changed, Janks. It hasn't changed. You could say he was more realistic and long in regards to how long it was going to take for the coup to take place. And not just the policy hasn't necessarily changed. The coup just failed, or at least failed in the current sense. And yeah, there may be other reasons other than this narrow window of Russiagate that you look at the world through that Donald Trump may be making decisions. Especially since, just saying. Just saying.